Thank you. And can I just get a confirmation that you all can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. My apologies. I am having internet issues, so I will not be able to be on video, or my computer will, um, the internet will be fuzzy and choppy. So apologies for not being on camera. We have gone ahead and started the recording. Again, this is James Poviwa, and I am the chair of the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council. This is the July 2024 meeting of the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council. We may not have quorum today, which was anticipated. However, we're going to continue to run the meeting primarily as a listening session, because we are recording this, and these meetings do go up on the New Mexico Economic Development Department's website. And we are continuing to review sectors within our state economic development plan. And so we wanted to continue that process and ensure that we make progress. I'm going to just go over a little bit of the agenda. Because we are likely not to have quorum, we will not be voting on anything today. So we will not be approving the agenda or the minutes. Again, this isn't a formal meeting, but a listening session. But we will then go into input on from the advisory council on the EDD's strategic plan, including a brief overview of corresponding documents and briefing materials, and discussion of this month's selected target sectors. I want to thank representatives that will be speaking on global trade and intelligent manufacturing, and then we'll have an opportunity for open discussion. Second part of our meeting is our listening session is to review a memo that the chair of the Sustainable Economy Task Force and I worked on, which is entitled Taking Stock of Where We're At with this council and the task force. And we'll also have an open discussion about that. We'll also be reviewing and discussing our August meeting for SEAC. And then finally, some updates from the advisory council working groups, and some updates from Kayla Lucero-Matusi, chair of the task force. Any public comment? And finally, we will end this listening session. So thank you all for being here today, and we will go ahead and jump into the rest of the work presentation that we have. So Kayla, maybe I can turn this over to you to talk a little bit about the format for advisory council input on the Economic Development Department's statewide strategic plan, and the corresponding documents.
Okay, great. Yeah, and right now it looks like we have 6 advisory council members present.
Thank you. I guess I should probably just go through roll call really
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah, let's just do a roll call.
Thank you. So I am present. Daisy Maldonado.
Present.
Thank you. Patricia Knighton, I believe, is absent and excused. Glenn Schiffbauer.
Present.
Thank you. Rob Black, I believe, is not able to make it. He is excused. Cassie Arias. Jonathan Perry.
Present.
Thank you. Mayani Barudin. Atza Chavez. Wendy Atsity.
Present.
Thank you. Janine Yazzie. Joe Little. Marissa Naranjo.
Present.
Thank you. So I think you're correct, Kayla. We have 6 members, unless I miscounted.
No, that's correct.
Thank you. So I think that confirms we do not have a quorum. Well, I guess 6 is technically a quorum. But please advise me on that, Kayla, if I'm correct or not.
So out of 13 total members, that is not over half.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So we can go ahead and move forward in a listening session. So yeah, let me pass it back to you, Kayla.
Okay, great. In that case, we will leave our minutes for approval until next month. And we just want to say a huge thank you to our presenters for being here. And so this constitutes our, I believe, second to last input session on the target sectors contained in the state plan. We're really excited for next month's session on sustainable and clean energy. And for this month, we have presenters focusing on global trade and intelligent manufacturing. So we have Celeste Nunez Salcido from the New Mexico Trade Alliance, and we have Jennifer Sensiba from the New Mexico Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So we're going to, you all have the briefing binders contained in the Google Drive that we've circulated as far as our advisory council members. I know that we have a lot of task force members attending as well, and we thank you for your presence here. There is going to be a compiled list of recommendations from the advisory council for you to consider at some point. So these sessions are part of that process of reviewing items from the plan, soliciting feedback, which our council members can voice to us here or through email, phone calls to me, whatever they're comfortable with. So just for our task force members who are attending, that's what we're doing here. We really want to get our advisory council's feedback on the plan. And I think with that, you guys know how this process works now. For those advisory council members who are present, we've done a few of these. I think we can go ahead and turn to our presenters on global trade and intelligent manufacturing. So I will just stop sharing and ensure that our presenters have sharing permissions. And we do apologize. We were having some trouble with our link this month. We didn't realize until right before the meeting. So we will definitely get that fixed for next month. And please forgive the inconvenience.
Thank you, Kayla.
There we go. So Celeste, I think that you should be able to share now. I just made you a co-host.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, give me 1 second while I open this up, but I want to start off by saying good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I think that the work that is being done on this advisory council is important, and I'm really excited to be invited to give an overview of what global trade is here in New Mexico. So I'm just about to share this. 1 second. Share the screen. Okay, that's not right. Okay. I think I got it, guys. 1 second.
Thank you, Celeste. And right before you begin, thank you again for being here and looking forward to the presentation. There is interpretation available. And so just as a reminder to everyone, what is helpful for interpretation is if you can not speak too quickly so that our interpreters can continue to do their interpretation. Thank you.
So James,
Okay.
with this improvised link, we're actually having a problem with the interpretation feature. So we're going to get that resolved by Thursday for the task force meeting, but unfortunately we were unable to figure that out in our last minute efforts to fix this.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. That's fine. And we'll fix it.
Great. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Everyone can see the title slide? Okay, as I mentioned, I'm excited to be here to talk about the role that global trade plays in our state, New Mexico. So, here we go. The agenda for this presentation will be as follows. I want to present an introduction to myself as well as the organization, the New Mexico Trade Alliance that I work with. And then I want to talk about, kind of give a snapshot what global trade is in New Mexico, talk about our trade partners, our products, and give some insight into what is actually traded for New Mexico. Then I want to talk about the trade assets, so the infrastructure that exists in our state that is propelling trade, and a little bit of a plug-in for the I-40 Trade Port Corridor, which I think is a project that has relevance to the mission of this council. Finally, kind of talking about our services with the Trade Alliance and highlighting the NM STEP grant, which is a major resource that supports exports for New Mexico companies. And then any questions or if that's at the end of this meeting. So my name's Celeste Núñez Salcido. I am actually from Las Cruces, so I wish I could have, I know this meeting was virtual, but maybe if it had been another day, I could have visited you guys in Sunland Park. But I'm based here in Albuquerque, and I've been working with the New Mexico Trade Alliance for about 5.5 years. My responsibility is to connect New Mexico businesses with local, state, federal, and sometimes international resources that'll help them meet clients and grow their international sales. Apart from that, I'm the chair of the Albuquerque Guadalajara Sister City Committee, so promoting exchanges between our two cities. I am also in the World Affairs Council of Albuquerque, United States Global Leadership Committee, coalition, but one thing recently that I'm excited to share about is a global shaper under the World Economic Forum. And I had the opportunity just last month to go to the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in China. So I'm excited to share some little insights of what I learned there. So I see someone's entered the waiting room. Rose rushing. Should I just admit that person in?
Please. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the New Mexico Trade Alliance, but we are a 501c6 economic development nonprofit. And we are funded by 4 levels of government: the city of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, the state of New Mexico, and also the Department of Defense with the Air Force Research Lab. You can think of the Trade Alliance as, again, an economic development organization with 2 hats. One is related to export assistance, so that mission being expanding New Mexico's global connectivity. And another portion that operating under the brand Q Station is related to promoting the commercial aerospace sector in New Mexico. I focus on the trade portion, and if you were all to be interested in Q Station, I'd be happy to connect you with Randy Trask, who heads that. So our mandate funded by government is to help companies find opportunities and export. So with that brief introduction, here we go. I'd like to pose a question to you all. Is trade and investment important? And this is something that I'd like you to think about as we go through this presentation, but I want to share with you the impact of trade. The exported goods of New Mexico account for about 4% of our GDP in 2023. But those exports, while it might sound like a small amount of the GDP, supported 15,000 jobs as of 2021, which is to this date still the most recent data. Over 1,300 New Mexico companies are exporting goods, which might sound surprising to some in 2022. And of those 1,300, 84% are small businesses. This means that exports sustain New Mexico businesses and jobs. 2/3 of those total exports of goods are SMEs, those small to medium-sized enterprises. Sorry, are you seeing my face up here on the screen? I can make this smaller. That's helpful. Okay. And New Mexico ranks 35th in agricultural exports. In fact, in some areas of agriculture exports, New Mexico ranks in the top 10 nationwide. For example, with dairy products, New Mexico has ranked 10th. And with tree nuts, New Mexico is ranked 3rd of all US states. Now, foreign-owned companies, they invest and they build facilities that employ nearly 19,000 workers in New Mexico as of 2021. So I'd like to talk about a little bit then, what are the specific details about global trade in New Mexico? Starting by looking at what is New Mexico exporting? I mean, like, what is the profile of New Mexico exports? And since 2015, we've seen stagnant export growth. Starting in 2015, these are in millions, about $3.7 billion worth of goods exported to, as we see, a peak, a pre-pandemic peak in 2019, followed by a drop in 2020. Great recovery, and again, kind of a slow taper off. In all, we're seeing about a 30% increase in exports over these years from 2015 to 2023. Looking at imports, though, we see a trend for imports. In fact, almost like a step ascendance. Back in 2015, about $2.2 billion worth of goods, increasing even during the pandemic, up until 2023, now at $6 billion worth of imports. This is showing a 167% increase. And since New Mexico, it imports more than it exports, that is what we call a trade deficit. Now, there's a lot of rhetoric around trade deficits, a lot of ideas that it's inherently a bad thing, but the situation is a little bit more nuanced than that. When we have imports, we're able to consume more than is produced. So something that is obviously not manufactured here in New Mexico, we can import it. And importing those other goods tends to lead to cheaper prices for consumers. So these lower prices, increased choice, and competition here that benefits New Mexico companies and families. However, that does also impact local manufacturing, and sometimes can lead to reliance, as we see now in federal policy trying to secure supply chains. So looking at that, I also want to mention one other thing. Most US states also operate on a trade deficit. The US has a trade deficit as well. So it's not something for concern. I'm not trying to scare anybody. Now, looking at our rank, in 2023, the top exporting state was Texas. The US as a whole in 2023 exported around $2 trillion, with Texas at that 446 billion, around a quarter, followed by California, New York, and now we see, down to 43, New Mexico. In this list, we see 54 entries. We know there's 50 states. This is because this list also includes District of Columbia, so DC, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and unallocated, as you see here in rank number 7. So exports that aren't allocated to a state. But yeah, looking at this, then if you were to only look at 50 states, that would increase New Mexico's rank by those two, unallocated and Puerto Rico, so would be 41st. Looking at imports, New Mexico ranks 44th, which means that there are more states that have an import, a greater number of value of imports than New Mexico. And that is spearheaded by California at 450 billion of the total US's 3 trillion imports. So we've gone to look at the impact of trade. We're going to look at the rank. Now let's look at the trade partners that New Mexico collaborates with for exports and imports. Starting with exports.
Pardon me, Solicit.
Yeah.
Are you sharing a PowerPoint?
Yes.
I'm not able to see it.
Oh, is anyone else able to see this?
I'm seeing it.
I'm seeing it as well.
Yeah,
I
I can
must.
see it.
It's okay, great. I'm glad. Then the issue's on my end. Please go ahead. I'll fix
Okay.
my issue.
Oh my goodness, you had me so scared there. I was like, people are just listening to me. Mm. Well, I hope I try not to be monotonous for you then. So it's a little bit more interesting. Okay, so now let's look at the top 20 export partners. So who is buying New Mexico's products outbound? And we see here that the top 10 in this Panama, France, Germany, South Korea, Taiwan, the UK, Canada, and then the top 3 being Mexico, China, and Colombia. Mexico by far is the largest trade partner for New Mexico, accounting for over 2/3 of our goods, followed by a 5% going to China. What was really interesting though in this is that in the 5.5 years I've been working with the Trade Alliance, not once have I ever seen Colombia at the top of that list. So to see it usurp Canada, which has typically always been the third place market, was fascinating. So what is New Mexico selling that is setting Colombia at such a high ranking on this list? We'll take a look at that a little bit closer later in this presentation. But with this map, we get an idea of a visual of where those products are moving. And you might be surprised to find that, New Mexico is exporting to a vast majority of the world. You see, again, a very strong concentration in Mexico. Again, Mexico is like more than 2/3 are going to Mexico. But you see this darker color with Canada, Colombia, and China. And you see several countries in the African continent. Now, this image cuts off, so I thought it'd be important to include this one as well. So you get a better view of all the countries that New Mexico exports to. And that includes Australia, Argentina, Brazil, even New Zealand. So then let's take a look at the import partners for New Mexico. Again, these are the top 20 import partners in 2023, the top 10. But looking at the top 3, again, we see the top import partner is Mexico with $2.4 billion of the 6 total, followed by China, and now Canada. So this shows that Colombia is a destination where products are being moved to, but there's not necessarily bilateral trade. We're not importing from Colombia. They don't even rank in the top 20. Fourth place being Japan, India, Germany, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, and Taiwan. So near like 40% is going to Mexico. The next one would be China. And when we look at the kind of the regional like trade alliances, the top alliance is the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which consists of 38 countries. But that includes, the US, Canada. When you think of more just region specific, New Mexico is by far exporting the most to APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation countries, which are a total of 21. So if we take a look at that map again, you now see a greater diversification. A greater, diversification of value being imported. So it's not just all clustered now in Mexico, which is still by far the biggest, but you see that China is now in a darker color. There's more imports coming from China, Canada, and you'll see here Germany as well and India. And what's fascinating is that those exports that we saw happening to countries in the African continent have kind of moved out of there. We're not importing as much from Africa. Now we're importing more from Europe, Russia, and more Asian countries. And let's take a wider view. Again, like I mentioned, New Mexico is surprisingly has a role with the global marketplace, maybe a role that we didn't expect. And I thought it was important then to compare the export and import maps. So here at the top, we once again get to see what markets New Mexico products are being sold to and how that contrasts with the markets that are selling to New Mexico. So now that we've taken a look at the partners that New Mexico has, I think it's important to look at the products that are being traded. And by far, technology spearheads New Mexico's global trade footprint. In 2023, the top 5 exports, nearing 5 billion, the vast majority came from computer equipment. About 34% of all exports being classified under the NAICS code of computer equipment, followed by aerospace products and parts, nearly 10%, and semiconductors at 7%. Many people, when we talk about trade, are surprised by this. They usually think that the top export for New Mexico is oil and gas or green chili. And it's fascinating to see that that's not the case at all, that it has to do with a lot of technology. And that's reflected as well as in our imports, where again, we import a value of 6 billion, with the top NAICS category being medical equipment and supplies at 944 million, accounting about 15%, followed by semiconductors and other electronic components at 14%, industrial machinery at 13%. What this shows us is that there's a concentration of the products that are being exported. There's a leading category, computer equipment, but in imports, there's a greater diversification of the import catalog, the products that are imported. It's not as concentrated in one specific category as we see in exports. So let's take a look then, closer look at the products that are being exported, not just the top 5, but the top 20. And like I just mentioned, this category is really concentrated in that one section, computer equipment. We can see in this graph how far this segment, the value of it, how much higher that value is in comparison to the other ones. But what's fascinating here is, like I mentioned, New Mexico is a top agriculture exporting state. And we see it in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7th place, where dairy products at 154 million account for 3% of our exports. This category is higher than oil and gas. New Mexico exports more dairy products in 2023, at least, than oil and gas. And that's followed by fabricated medical products, navigational medical instruments, chemical products, motor vehicle parts, pesticides and agrochemicals, waste and scrap, plastic products, commercial refrigeration equipment, so on. Now, one thing I want to mention is that this data is sourced by the International Trade Administration that uses the US Census Bureau. But the International Trade Administration, which is basically the federal agency that supports exports and trade, they classify using NAICS codes. NAICS stands for North American Industry Classification System. And there's another system that's used in trade, which are HS codes, Harmonized System Codes. Now, they may sound the same, but they're different. NAICS codes are usually are basically only used in North America, and they categorize business by the type of economic activity. Not to just put it simply, NAICS codes tell us more about the manufacturer type than the product. So we're getting an idea of who is selling more than what they are actually selling. So this means that in the computer equipment section, the manufacturers that are selling this identify as manufacturing computer equipment, but it's not telling us so much what that product is. Whereas on the contrast, HS codes are 6-digit codes under the jurisdiction of the World Customs Organization that tell us more about the product. So let's take a look at what the top 20 exports are using HS codes. And this shows us that the top product is still industrial machinery, including computers. So kind of still the same, but it gives us more details. So for example, we see that the second category is electric machinery, sound equipment, TV equipment, parts, aircraft, spacecraft, what have you. But again, we see the same, we see comparable numbers. We see that dairy products, again, which in the last slide were about what, 154 million. Here are about 146 million, followed by fertilizers, vehicle parts, iron, steel, aluminum, things like that. So we might be surprised by what New Mexico is actually exporting. Now let's take a look at the same information, but this time for imports. Going back to NAICS codes again, getting an idea of what industries more than anything are importing to New Mexico. We see this led by medical equipment and supplies at 944 million, followed by semiconductors, industrial machinery, instruments, what have you. One thing that I want to point out is that we see 9800 goods return, exports and imports, and re-imports. Those are just products like that were returned. Okay, at the top you'll see NAICS NAICS code 1121 cattle at 55 million. What's really fascinating is, I don't know if you guys have been to the border. I mean, well, you probably have. You're at Sunland Park, or maybe some of you are there. There are on the border, truly on the wall, two ranches, one in Chihuahua and one in New Mexico, adjacent to each other. And the Chihuahua ranch basically serves as a clearinghouse for cattle all around Mexico that then is like imported to New Mexico by lifting almost like a part of the wall. It's the most incredible thing ever. There's like the wall has a lever and it lifts up and cattle cross over to New Mexico and from there are sold to the rest of the country. So that's why we see cattle as an import ranking in the top 20 for New Mexico. Looking at then HS code to get a better view of the products, we see again industrial machinery, including computers, at the top of that, followed by medical or surgical, optical, photo, etc. Parts, sound equipment, TV equipment, kind of the same components that we see in exports. And then again, we see here live animals at 57 million. That reflects the same thing we saw in the NAICS codes. But now we see other items like edible vegetables, coffee, tea, spices, aircraft, space, aluminum, miscellaneous articles of base metal, edible fruits, and more things related to the agriculture industry. One of the categories here, here we go, special classification provisions, not elsewhere. What's the word? Not elsewhere selected or indicated. That has to do with articles exported and then returned to the US, products that are being repaired abroad, or products that were imported to be repaired that were then exported, or even like military wearing apparel or military equipment not identified by kind. But seeing that the computer electronics category champions both exports and imports, that tells us that there's a lot of components coming in, some manufacturing, value-added manufacturing happened, and then that exported out. This could be, this is most likely activity happening along foreign trade zones. So now that we've got an idea of our trade partners and what we're, the specific products that we're trading, let's dig deep into those top 3 markets: Mexico, China, Canada, and Colombia. So starting with, let's start with Mexico as our top partner. Again, our exports with Mexico being about 3.5 billion and our imports at 2.5 billion. We actually have a trade surplus with Mexico, so we're exporting more to them. And this shows that the majority of our exports, which again, our top 5 all along, or top 20, are computer equipment. Most of them are going to Mexico at $1.6 million. And if we look at our exports with HS codes, the same information is reflected. Industrial machinery, including computers, that this time mineral fuel, advancing to the 3rd spot. And then dairy products. So we get an idea of what is the most important exports from New Mexico and where are they going. Most of them are going to Mexico. Now looking at imports, we're importing a lot of medical equipment and supplies from Mexico. And that again was our top import category for the entire world. So just further emphasizing how important that relationship is with Mexico. Now looking at our HS codes, we see that information further reflected with optic, photo, medic, or surgical instruments. One thing that I want to mention though is it's not the top 5, but the top 6th spot was live animals. So again, it's that ranch that's in southern New Mexico that is just taking in cattle. How am I on time? I don't want to take up too much. Maybe we'll move a little bit faster. Looking at China, we export $260 million to China, but we import 1.6 billion. So that trade deficit is very prevalent with the Chinese market. Exporting a lot of aerospace products and parts. You can take a look at the other things that we're exporting. And then when we look at HS codes of what we're exporting, a lot of it is aircraft, spacecraft, and parts. So this gives us a little bit more details about what's being sent to China. And with miscellaneous chemical products, when I searched this with a higher HS code to get more detail, it showed chemicals used for electronic manufacturing, like disc wafers, things like that. Imports, the majority that we're of products that we're importing from China are semiconductors and electronic components, followed by industrial machinery. Looking at HS codes, computer parts, sound equipment, TV equipment, basically the same kind of categories that we see when we look at global imports. Now, again, this is personally, I was very curious. I thought, why is Colombia ranking so high? It never has ranked high. It's never been an export destination. So I wanted to share that a lot of it is aerospace products and parts. I know that you guys have listened, or maybe you have already heard from someone talking about aerospace as a target industry in New Mexico. So now you can share with them that Colombia seems to be quite the market of opportunity with $193 million in exports. And now looking at HS codes, same, aircraft, spacecraft. When I look at more details, it was civilian aircraft, engines, and parts. Let's take a look at Canada, which is our 3rd ranking import partner. So we're not going to look at the exports. We're going to look at imports. We're importing basic chemicals and grain and oilseed. And that is reflected once again with HS codes, inorganic chemicals, precious and rare earth metal and radioactive compounds, radioactive chemical elements and isotopes. So things, yes, for manufacturing. So let's talk a little bit about our trade assets. New Mexico being a border state really sets us up for success. Considering that New Mexico can serve as a logistics hub to reach the rest of the nation, and companies looking to invest here can take advantage of the border and use or leverage lower manufacturing costs and lower labor costs in Chihuahua. They can take advantage of that major manufacturing region and import into New Mexico and reach the rest of the U.S. This is going to be the kind of strategy that is going to be looked at as we see industrial policies and tariffs diversify supply chains. New Mexico also has 4 international ports of entry. So ports of entry being areas where goods and people can enter and exit the country. We have Albuquerque, Antelope Wells, Columbus, and Santa Teresa. Santa Teresa Port of Entry is the region's most modern and the fastest area for commercial crossing times. And we saw the Santa Teresa Port of Entry kind of rise as a champion when Governor Abbott in Texas implemented more trade inspections. So a lot of that trade that would have gone to El Paso was now happening through Santa Teresa region. You guys know about this, the Union Pacific Intermodal Facility, a $224 million investment that set up, basically a switching and refueling station that incentivizes warehousing and more logistics in that area. And then related to road transportation, Albuquerque boasts of being at the intersection of 2 major transcontinental interstate highways, I-40, which connects California all the way to North Carolina. I mean, that's over 2,500 miles. It's the 3rd largest interstate highway in the US. And I-25, which connects from southern New Mexico all the way to Wyoming. And then the same for the border region, which boasts of I-25 as well, but has I-10, which is the southernmost transcontinental highway, the 4th longest at 2,400 miles, and it connects, honestly, coast to coast, the Santa Monica, California, all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. And New Mexico has 2 foreign trade zones. Foreign trade zones, for those that may not know, is a secure area in the United States that allows for special customs procedures. And basically, foreign trade zones allow importers and exporters to move goods in and out, and sometimes reduce or completely eliminate customs duties, taxes, or fees. So they're great for manufacturing. And there's one in Doñana and in Albuquerque. And this last point is given by New Mexico Partnership. New Mexico is located within 2 days of 75% of the US population by truck. Something that, companies are looking to invest are interested in, knowing that the US market is one to reach. So this image kind of gives us a little bit better of a view of the trade ports, logistical advantages. And I didn't mention the last slide, but the rail, the trade port boasts of both BNSF lines and Union Pacific. And since it's so close to Ciudad Juarez, I mean, by proximity, also Ferromex, the rail line that operates in Mexico and drives all the way down to Mexico City. So this leads me to talk about something that I think would be interesting for you all to consider, which is the I-40 trade port corridor. This strategy in Albuquerque, being led by the Bernalillo County, is meant to put New Mexico and Albuquerque on the forefront of clean energy. It consists of 3 states, 4 partners, the Port of Los Angeles, 2 cities in Arizona, and Albuquerque, that are setting up a strategy for what the future will look like for moving cargo efficiently and seamlessly, but also using clean energy. This would involve, energy vehicles, EV chargers, setting up strategic hubs along the way that promote trade movement in the new era of the green transition. What's fascinating about this is that they've been awarded $15 million by the Department of Transportation to prepare those sites. So setting up roadway design, the site assessment, so that potential private investors can come in to these areas prepared and start setting up along, this corridor, their infrastructure that promotes this energy transition. Now, we're seeing this garner interest already. Last month, Albuquerque hosted 11 Taiwanese manufacturers. They visited the southern region at one point, but strategically identified Albuquerque as a place where they could potentially invest. These were companies related to automotive manufacturing, electronic manufacturing, AI and Internet of Things manufacturing. And they were interested in the role that Albuquerque will play for the green energy transition, looking at how Maxion has, named Albuquerque its location for $2 billion investment. And this speaks to the necessity to build out infrastructure for clean energy logistics. And California has already passed a law that I believe by 2030 or 2035, no more vehicles can be sold that are not fully electric vehicles. So the change is happening, and the I-40 trade port corridor seeks to create a public-private template for what the world can look forward to as we build out clean energy infrastructure and logistics. And this trend, this wind, is only accelerating. While I was at the World Economic Forum meeting in China, we got to hear about AI and the clean energy transition, and China is the #1 investor in clean energy. And there was one company related to TV manufacturing that said, we can no longer manufacture where we're not selling. We need to manufacture where we're selling. So that means Chinese investment happening in Mexico, seeking to circumvent those tariffs and enter the US market, or Chinese or Taiwanese investment happening within the US and seeking those new trade corridors. So now that we've taken a very large view at what the trade role is for New Mexico, and we've discussed the impact that it has, you might be wondering, well, what can we do to support exports? What can we do to prepare our companies for global growth? And the Trade Alliance.
Sorry, just wanted to say, let's keep it a little bit short at the end here so that our council has time, because we have another presentation as well. So, but I don't want to cut you off. So sorry. Yeah.
No worries. No worries. Thank you. These are some of the services that we support with, but the main one that I'd like to talk about is the STEP grant. It's a federally funded export grant, and I'm sharing this with you all as, business and community leaders. If you know a business that is looking to export, there is a grant of up to $7,500 that reimburses international business development costs, such as exhibiting at a trade show, market research, business matchmaking, foreign trade missions, things that would help a company find a sale abroad. And to talk about that impact, since 2021, when the Trade Alliance was contracted by New Mexico Economic Development Department to administer this program, more than $500,000 of grant funds have been awarded, funding more than 110 projects that go to more than 75 local New Mexico small businesses. This is a program for small businesses. And this has yielded an ROI of 1,895%. Those $500,000 have helped companies make sales, and that ROI is showing us that for every dollar that we spend, we're receiving a profit of around $19. Not revenue, profit after taking into account the cost of it, $19. So there's a really big impact happening through the STEP grant. And I'm very proud of the work that we do. I hope that we can continue to share this program with small businesses so that we can grow New Mexico exports and hopefully lift up our rank, And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you all so much. Here's my contact. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to connect.
Thank you so much, Celeste. Really fascinating presentation. I hope if you are able to stick around for a few questions, Kayla, we can still do the other section of the our section of this of the listening session today, but I want to make sure we get in questions since our presenters are with us and we will have them later. And why don't we go ahead and move on to our next presentation, and then we can do some Q&A afterwards. So I want to invite Jennifer Finsaba, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your last name.
You got it perfect.
Are
Well,
you able
welcome.
to share, Jennifer?
Yes, I can share my presentation unless you were going to do it, whatever.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Thank you. It says it's disabled. Share screen sharing.
Oh, maybe it's because I'm the host, I think. I was made host.
Let's see. Yeah, you may need to designate Jennifer now.
Okay. Sorry, how do I do that?
I think you just click on, when you see Jennifer's face, there's 3 dots at the top right of her little profile, and you should be able to say make co-host.
Okay, perfect. Did it.
Yeah.
Looky there. Here we go. All righty. Let me make sure I get the right one. And then, is it up?
Yes.
And get all our different stuff here. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Celeste, for a great presentation. Hopefully this will correlate to that presentation fairly closely as well. So my name is Jennifer Finsaba. I'm the CEO with the New Mexico Manufacturing Extension Partnership. Just wanted to cover a little bit today on the manufacturing ecosystem, what it looks like here in New Mexico, and how it kind of folds into this sub-industry, if you will, of intelligent manufacturing, and kind of what we see that as meaning for the state of New Mexico. So let's see, there we go. So just quickly on New Mexico MEP, we are a nonprofit 501c3 nonprofit here in the state of New Mexico. We're loosely connected to the U.S. Department of Commerce and the National Institutes of Standards and Technology. In some way, shape, or form, there's an MEP in every state. And so we work with manufacturers and manufacturing companies and folks who support manufacturing throughout the entire state of New Mexico. We're not a membership, much like Celeste's organization. We're not a membership organization. We're a technical assistance organization. So we have a team of manufacturing and engineering experts that are available to assist our manufacturers and companies to overcome their whatever barriers to growth they may have. So really looking to see how do we help keep, maintain, and grow global competitiveness within our manufacturers. We do that through a plethora of different ways. So we look at process optimization, technology deployment. We can look at what's called kind of industry 4.0, 5.0, advanced manufacturing, all those kind of terms. Work with workforce development and safety, quality systems, supply chain, those different pieces that go into really growing manufacturing. Partnerships in our name for good reason. So although we do have a team on site that has certain expertise, we also partner very closely with the likes of New Mexico EDD and the New Mexico Trade Alliance and Cindy and Los Alamos National Labs and all the universities and the great resources that we have here in the state of New Mexico for our businesses to work together and really bring a good solution set to any challenges that we may identify. So that's a little bit on MEP. Happy to answer questions on that, but really kind of wanted to dive into a little bit on statistics within the state of within manufacturing, specifically in New Mexico. And I always like to say there's some things to keep in mind. We can change definitions or when the definition changes, things change dramatically, right? And also small doesn't always get counted the same. And that's that can be a big impact for the state of New Mexico as well when we're looking at different statistics. So when I report these types of numbers, I always kind of like to keep a real conservative or low end of the range and then talk more about, and then also look at kind of what that high end of the range could be. And for you and your purposes and what you're trying to accomplish, decide within those parameters what kind of set of numbers makes the most sense for you, you to kind of think about the scale of manufacturing in the state of New Mexico. So as of 2019, and actually hasn't changed much, 2022's numbers 4.3 billion as well. Looking at output from manufacturers in the state of New Mexico, the low kind of end range of that is 4.3 billion, all the way up to, we can look at that number all the way up to the higher range of 20 billion. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, different entities record these numbers differently. And so some will only on the low end, you're looking at things that physically started as raw material in the state of New Mexico and were manufactured into an end product. And that's what kind of gets consumed into the lower end of the range number. Now, when you start looking at the higher range number, we could include things that had R&D that took place in the state of New Mexico, you know, any portion of the manufacturing process from research and development all the way through packaging for transportation. If any piece or parcel of that happened in the state of New Mexico for potential product, then you can start to include that in that higher range number. And so that's really how drastic it can be, but it takes all of it to make it happen, right? So, so important to understand that definition. The second one here is the actual number of manufacturing establishments in the state of New Mexico. Again, Celeste did me a favor in explaining NAICS NAICS codes and how those work. And so here again on kind of that lower range, we see what is typically defined as through the census. Now, when I said small doesn't always get counted the same, when they do the census, they only follow up with companies that have more than 500 employees. So unless a company voluntarily returned their census and didn't need any reminders to do so, they're actually probably not going to get counted in that number as much as the 500 plus companies that get several reminders and sometimes even threats to fill out that information and get that in. So in that sense, you can see how a company or a state like New Mexico that has several a large percentage of our businesses with under 500 employees might actually have less reported than the true number. Now you can go up on the high range and you see that so that low range number 1,300, that higher range number can go upwards of 7,000. That's including any type of entity that has a location here in the state of New Mexico. That would include folks like Schlumberger or Exxon or Chevron that have a wellhead in the state of New Mexico that are producing oil. So they might not even have any employees here. They might just have some equipment doing some work and they come and check on it every now and then or haul it out or something like that. So that's where it can span to that higher range. The other thing is how you define manufacturing. So Department of Commerce actually defines manufacturing starting at the research and development stage. So it's everything within the manufacturing, within a process that's needed to manufacture a product. So it can start all the way with R&D, go through testing and analysis can be counted as manufacturing, through your traditional kind of value-added manufacturing pieces where you're physically producing the product, all the way to the end of packaging and what happens there. So that also can play into that number of establishments. The third number I have here is number of employees in the state of New Mexico within the industry, within manufacturing industry. You can see on the low end, that's 29,000. So another fun fact is that when the Department of Labor sets out these numbers and statistics for Bureau for Statistics and Labor sets out these numbers, they're done so by occupation code. So when you have an entity like, let's take something we all know, like Intel, for instance, the number that gets reported as far as number of manufacturing employees are only those employees that physically touch the product. So if you're in accounting, HR, organizational development, supply chain, anything like that, that's not actually physically touching the product, you're not going to be accounted in that 29,000 number. And the same goes for any company. We lay that across all of our small companies. So when we actually look at the number of of New Mexicans employed by manufacturers, that number jumps up to just over 100,000. So you can again see kind of a vast, sorry, I have somebody, Marcela Diaz, in the waiting room.
Yeah, you can admit anyone that you see. I don't know why
Okay.
it's only letting us have one host.
Okay, no worries. Just wanted to make sure. So just so that's a little bit about understanding some of the statistics wrapped up in the overall side of manufacturing. Next here is number of employees per company. So I always say, you know, we have a very small but mighty manufacturing force in the state of New Mexico. This is another way of showing it, which is approximately 95% of our manufacturing firms here in the state have 49 or less employees. We don't have a lot in the much larger range. Even when they're kind of corporate owned, they tend to be on the smaller side, large corporations. You know, so if you're thinking, wow, I don't know that many large businesses in the state of New Mexico, you can, and you're counting them on your hand, you're probably close to being right. So there's just not that many here. That does mean, however, that we have a very diverse workforce because they typically have worked in several different industries. So we have folks that can hop from machining to aerospace over to renewable energy. Those types of skill sets tend to be very, very popular. Here we see the annual revenue. So our manufacturers by annual revenue. And again, you can see here that approximately 80% of them fall in the 5 million or less category. This becomes very
Sorry,
important.
Jennifer, to interrupt. Oh,
No, that's
I was going to say someone was not on mute, but we're good now, I think.
okay, perfect. Thank you. So we have about 80% or so that fall in the 5 million or less category. This becomes important when we start to talk about intelligent manufacturing or advanced manufacturing or moving our manufacturers forward using technology, any of those things, because you can see since they're on a small scale, they're going to have to implement technology on a small scale. If they're only making 5 million, you know, and this is revenue, not profits. If they're sitting there at 5 million, you know, your typical profit margin might only be somewhere between 5 and 20%. They don't have a ton of money to reinvest and completely outfit their shop with the latest and greatest technology in 1 year. This is something that has to be done systematically over many years. As for density, kind of by county here, you can see a very large percent, over 50% reside within Bernalillo County, kind of the metropolitan surrounding area. And then we do have pockets in Dona Ana, Santa Fe, San Juan, Sandoval County. Now this is by number of establishments. So we like to do that when we start doing things by dollars, then again, from the folks like Intel and different companies like that, it can really skew those numbers. So, but here you can kind of see where those pockets of manufacturing fall. And then, sorry, this is a bit of an eye chart, but this is just by industry within the state of New Mexico. And you'll see, again, because the Department of Commerce does include research and development, we've included it here, which is that engineering services line. Because of the amount of federal contracting and federal labs work that is done here in the state by small businesses, that number is fairly large. We see a lot of companies coming out, either spinning out of the labs or setting up shop to support national labs like AFRL, Sandia, Los Alamos, Wright Sands Missile Range, as well as our universities. The second highest category there, I'm sorry, I'm pushing something it doesn't like. The second highest category is fabricated metal and product manufacturing, which is machine shop machining, those types, anything really having to do with metal, a little bit of metal stamping type of manufacturing. What's interesting is miscellaneous has always ranked in the top 4 in the state of New Mexico. a lot of times this has to do with how companies categorize themselves. So if they think that they cross many different sub-industries, they will just put themselves in miscellaneous, not realizing they can actually tag themselves in more than one. And then the other thing that happens with miscellaneous is that this includes things like jewelry or artisans. And so obviously from our cultural diversity within the state, we have a lot that fall into those areas and those categories as well. The other important thing I like to kind of note here is that you can see food manufacturing is a little bit down the list, and beverage manufacturing is second to last in this top list here. But if you actually combine food and beverage, which we tend to do within our business processes, that jumps up into that fourth place list. It has been, and it also has been the largest growing or the fastest growing sector over the last 5 or so years within the state. So I always like to, when I give these types of presentations outside of the state of New Mexico, it's like, so buy more tortillas and salsa and green chili, please, because we're finally getting it outside of our state borders. So how does this kind of how do the EDD target industries align with manufacturing? I always think it's very interesting, because if you start to really take apart and define some of these different industries, you see that it's actually how the industries are designed and aligned are very, very close. There's a lot of crossover, there's a lot of connections, and there's a lot of important ties. So obviously, aerospace and aviation is considered part of manufacturing. You've got intelligent manufacturing, sustainable and green energy. So any type of the renewable, solar panels, any of the connectors, the wiring harnesses, the racking systems for solar panels, those types of things are also manufactured here. So crossover into there. Sustainable and value-added agriculture is all considered manufacturing. Any type of value-added agriculture, it is wrapped into there. Biosciences, a lot of we actually are growing in the areas of pharma and bioscience technologies that are being produced. Obviously, as Celeste talked about, global trade, got to make it to be able to get it outside of the state. And so that's wrapped up in there. I didn't actually highlight film and television and outdoor rec because then I think I'm getting a little greedy with how much manufacturing touches, but we do have, we work with companies on a regular basis that do manufacture props. They manufacture sets, set development for film and television. They manufacture costumes, quite a few that do the costume production for film and television. So again, wrapping in that whole ecosystem. And as far as outdoor recreation, we do actually have a decent number of companies that are making hunting equipment, paddle boards, rafts, those types of things that all fall into outdoor and support outdoor recreation as well. Cybersecurity is on this list. It is not something that is manufactured per se, but is excruciatingly important to the manufacturing industry, lots of industries, but it's manufacturing industry as well, as we're bringing advanced manufacturing technologies onto shop floors and seeing the effects that, that hopefully nobody was traveling this weekend, but obviously cybersecurity plays a huge role in supply chains and ability to keep your finances secure as well. So it is all very important and wrapped up in that ecosystem that is supportive of manufacturing and that manufacturing supports. As far as kind of this thought about intelligent manufacturing, or where is manufacturing going, right? And how do we keep, it's a question that the team here in New Mexico MEP asks all the time, is how do we make sure we're keeping all of the manufacturers in New Mexico relevant, both on a national level and on an international level? And so times are changing, technology is evolving extremely quickly. And so we have some challenges, and some of those are around what's called Industry 4.0, Industry 5.0, the next industrial revolution, advanced manufacturing, all those different things. where companies are having to make new investments into technology. They're having to figure out how to integrate those into their current systems, products, their quality systems, and all at the same time as keeping their facilities cyber secure. The other thing we're seeing is, it's starting to loosen up a little bit, but in any industry you've heard, since COVID, there's been workforce challenges. And so finding interested and qualified candidates that understand that manufacturing isn't manufacturing. Today's manufacturing doesn't look like it did 30 or 40 years ago. We're not talking big smokestacks. We're not talking huge, dangerous machinery. Technology's advanced quite a bit. And especially here in the state of New Mexico, we tend to have things happening on a smaller level with less need for that type of large manufacturing. So you're seeing more innovation going into manufacturing in general. There's also a need to upskill the current workforce. So our higher education institutions and even our K through 12 institutions are doing a good job at starting to introduce learners into some of the technologies and the different skill sets that are needed and will be needed in manufacturing environments. But we also can't forget about that anywhere from 29,000 to 100,000 employees that are already sitting in a workforce that we don't want them to get left behind as new technologies come into place. So we need to make sure that we're upskilling our current workforce at the same point in time. So how can New Mexico capitalize on our strengths? I said before, we're small but mighty. That means that we're really, really good at doing something called high mix, low volume, which fits really well in today's manufacturing environment. So like I said before, we're getting away from having to do millions and millions and millions of the exact same thing. Folks are interested in unique, different, slightly personalized maybe. And so that actually fits into the manufacturing environment fairly well in New Mexico. And we just need to make sure we're going to capitalize on it. We also want to make sure that we capitalize because of that. Our manufacturers tend to be very agile and adaptable. They're used to working with our federal partners. They're used to working with national labs and Air Force research labs, which definitely require some agility. They're doing R&D tandem with those folks to figure out new and better ways to do things consistently. We want to make sure that we can capitalize on a ready and able workforce. So as we're putting these new programs in place that are seeing results, especially in the workforce area, that we can figure out how to map those folks appropriately into manufacturing. So here at MEP, October is the manufacturing month. We have several companies that open their doors to the public for tours. We work with schools. We work with, they're just open to the public. General public can go see kind of what's being made in New Mexico by New Mexicans and how it's being done. And it's always fascinating to see folks. We had some students going through the packaging department of one of our manufacturers, and you had a couple of folks that were interested in graphic arts that had never thought about the fact that the package is what sells a lot of different products that are on shelves, especially in a retail environment. And so graphic arts is extremely important. And so although they want to be graphic artists, they might not really think about manufacturing as a potential career path, and yet it is. So that's on our website. I'm sorry, I'm trying to admit somebody and it's not letting me. It went away. I'm sorry. I was trying to admit somebody and instead it was clicking through my presentation. So along with what I mentioned about the number of industries we have, how they cross services, how we have a lot of R&D and engineering services available, this brings with it a broad knowledge of capabilities, broad knowledge and capabilities. And so we need to make sure that we can act on those and take advantage of those. The manufacturers in New Mexico tend to have very, very high precision and detail abilities. We see this especially in machine shops. They're used to doing really, really high precision, high tolerance type of work that you don't necessarily see in the rest of the country. And if we can help capitalize on that and look for opportunities to support them, then that's, and get it outside of just the state, then that would be an opportunity we could look at as well. And we have great access to technical expertise in this state through different programs like the New Mexico Small Business Assistance Program that allows small businesses access to the national laboratories and their resources. And so that is something that needs to be highlighted because it helps move companies forward quite often. That is, I know we're running up on time, so I don't want to go too long, but that's a general overview kind of manufacturing, intelligent manufacturing, where manufacturing is headed. Happy to take any questions. Here's my contact information. If anybody needs it, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Jen.
Go ahead,
Jen,
Kayla.
would you designate me as host and we can move to questions?
I sure will.
Thank you to both of our presenters. So we're going to prioritize questions from our advisory council members. Again, for those who joined late, we don't have quorum today. So we're just moving informally through these presentations to make them available to the remainder of our advisory council members. We had a lot of RSVPs that folks were otherwise occupied with appointments and other meetings. So, but we're very grateful nonetheless to have Jen and Celeste here. So do any of our council members have questions for our presenters?
Thank you, Kayla. And I'll also add the task force members also are invited to chime in. So Jennifer, I had a question, and I apologize if I missed it in your presentation, but do you have any statistics on what the average and or median wages are for intelligent manufacturing?
Yes, the most recent numbers that we have are 2023, and it's 76,000 per year.
The average or the median?
Median.
Okay, thank you.
James, are you still talking? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I think I had a little blip on my internet. Is it okay now?
Yeah.
I think so. And then Celeste, just thank you. Like both of these presentations, really interesting and very informative. So thank you. And I hope that I definitely will have more follow-up questions. I will reach out to both of you. But I was wondering, in terms of global trade, similar question. Have you done a comparison of, I know that you were giving us statistics on export and import just by the state. And I wonder if you have done a similar comparison with other states or other countries to identify opportunities or threats to growing global trade for the state.
I can't say that that's something that we've done recently, but that's a great suggestion.
I would be very interested just to have a thought of like what other states might be importing particular products from another state or from another country where New Mexico might be able to fill that gap as an opportunity. And similarly, are there areas where we need to figure out policies that might shore up threats to our our exports or grow them. Also for Santa Teresa, I was wondering for that port of entry, are there any opportunities whether it's infrastructure or policy that could increase the capacity or productivity of that port of entry?
That's like, yeah, that's a really huge question. And I think that the major policies that are impeding a lot of that trade are happening at the federal level. So things like the CHIPS Act that are putting provisions against, for example, some companies here in the US exporting certain products to certain markets. That's something that affects New Mexico businesses, as we saw that one of the top categories are semiconductors and things like that. But what was interesting is that at the US level, even though that there are these trade barriers to support and bolster domestic manufacturing of these critical industries, there still was an uptick in semiconductor exporting to China. And these tariffs that have been implemented, from the Trump administration and continued on to the Biden administration. So a new era of trade protectionism that is bipartisan. I don't want anyone to walk away from here thinking it's one. Both administrations support some level of protectionism of US domestic manufacturing. That has impacted imports for businesses here. We have a survey for companies kind of asking what are some trade trends or industry like industry insights that you'd like the state of New Mexico to be aware of. And some of them are saying, tariffs on China hurt us. And some of the solicitations of support that we receive are finding opportunities for contract manufacturing out of China because costs have increased. So that is something that impacts businesses. But on the other side, it does create a lot of opportunity for FDI for New Mexico. When there are restrictions for Chinese manufacturers, for example, of EV chargers or solar panels or things like that to import into the US, that is causing them to change their supply chain. That is why we saw a delegation of 11 Taiwanese suppliers come and visit Albuquerque, because the other cities they visited were Houston and Monterrey, Mexico. Why did Albuquerque make the list against these major cities like Houston and Monterrey? Well, they're looking at how do we circumvent those tariffs, either set up manufacturing in Mexico and then import from Mexico to the US so that we can work around the tariffs, or how do we just set up manufacturing in the US? That's going to provide a big opportunity. So while there's some impacts, there's also a lot of opportunities. And what else was going to mention? An insight that I learned from the World Economic Forum in China was I wanted to understand how these industrial policies are going to impact the global supply chain. And my theory was, as trade power is democratized, as these other countries like Mexico, Vietnam have a bigger role to play, where they are basically the nearshoring partners, are they going to there flex their arms against China and the US, saying, you want to set up manufacturing here to work around each other's trade provisions? We're going to ask more of you. And these countries are going to face more development, more opportunity. But what we're finding is that these alliances, these trade agreements, they're being fortified. So while I was there, one of the questions was to a minister from Vietnam. And just there, they asked the question, we hear rumors that you're joining BRICS. He confirmed it. So it's going to impact the agreements that we have, the free trade agreements that exist in the world. And the USMCA, I believe it's set up to renegotiate its agreement either 2025 or 2026. One of the topics that we can expect to see there is, how is the US going to ensure, or at least sway how Mexico, what level of welcomeness they're going to have to Chinese investment. So there's challenges, but also truly, in my opinion, a great ample spread of opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sam. That's very helpful. I know we're at time, but I want to just and I have maybe one or two other questions, but wanted to make sure that there weren't other folks that had a burning question.
I guess Jennifer and I are just such great presenters. We answered every question. Just kidding.
I think a lot of us are really, I mean, this is lots of information, very helpful. Jennifer, you did mention that workforce is a challenge, especially post-pandemic. What do you think are the barriers for folks to be able to, for the workforce to be generated and for people to have pathways uh, to enter into intelligent manufacturing as a profession?
Yeah, so I think that that a very obviously a very loaded question, but number one is awareness, and I'll say this outside of, obviously I focus on manufacturing, but outside of manufacturing in general is just awareness of what career pathways exist. So if you go back, even 10, 12 years ago, manufacturers and entities like us would not have been invited to like a K through 12 school to give a presentation on manufacturing, because we were so focused on college prep and everything going into college prep. And so the sentiment has changed, I think, into, wait a minute, maybe that's not meant for everybody. Maybe we need to really look at what passions drive our learners, and how we can get them the most involved in whatever workforce discipline they want to be or will want to be in. And that's part of the efforts of keeping our New Mexicans here in New Mexico too, right? So I think awareness as far as career pathways is critical and important, and truly understanding what those pathways are and what they look like and what's required for them. I think the other thing that's starting to come a long way and make a really big difference in the manufacturing industry specifically is non-credit programs offered primarily at community college and technical vocational schools throughout the state. So, I was just mentioning this at another meeting, but it's really important that we kind of drive the fear of higher education. There's, for a certain population, there's a fear of higher education, if you will. Either a lack of confidence, a lack of understanding, not sure it's what they really want to do. But some of the programs that are in place right now that really focus on skills development and trade development allow folks to understand that they can do it. It might be a 2 or 3 or 10-week boot camp or something like that, where they learn and they gain the confidence that they can do it. At the same point in time, they're attaining a skill that's important to industry and making them hireable. I think a lot of those programs, if you look kind of statewide, are sitting in the 90th percentile or in the 90% range for being able to place folks into jobs out of those types of programs. That's really helping industry as well, because we've come out to learn over the last 10 years that this is going to be a shared economy going forward. Workforce and the training of our workforce and the upskill of our workforce is really going to be a shared responsibility. Higher ed and education and estates and municipalities can't carry it alone. The students can't carry it alone, and the industry can't carry it alone. So we all have to come to the table to help move those things forward. Definitely. And also the other thing is that technology is moving so fast that if you were to even get into a 2-year degree program today, part of what you learned in that first 30% of your coursework is going to be outdated or close to being replaced by the time you graduate with that 2-year degree. So, so keeping those types of things in mind, we're now entering into a phase where it's lifelong learning, and we need to really invest and bolster in those systems that are going to make the most cutting edge curriculums available to our workforce to keep ahead and stay globally competitive.
Yeah. And just a quick follow-up to that. Are there examples of project labor agreements or community benefits agreements with the companies that you work with? And are there ways to incentivize that you think are good practices?
For
For instance, with project labor agreements or community benefits agreements, I think Intel is a good example of a company that, in order to locate in Rio Rancho or the edge of Albuquerque, had to commit to hiring local. So that's one example.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, I think that that's definitely I think that that's a good example. I think we always have to remember about unintended consequences. So you go back to my slide on the percentage of companies that are under 50 employees, right? And that's 95% of our small businesses and manufacturers here. And the important piece about that is that as close as we are, so when we hear great announcements that are amazing for our economy, like Maxion hiring 1,800 employees, there's this little cringe of ours too, because we know that over 50% of those are going to come from our current small businesses and their workforce, right? And so when you talk to the local homegrown companies, they and there's some of them that can really put together a plan and show how many of our workforce they've trained on their backs, on the backs of small business, to get them ready and willing and able, and then to have them go to these larger companies that get really good incentives that they didn't get, maybe because they're small and they don't bring that kind of big number. So I do think that having those types of ROIs on a big company like Intel or Maxion or whatever is important. I do think the other one is hiring New Mexico grads so that we can keep our graduate knowledge base here in the state as well, is important. I would like to see some other ones that support local supply chain. So we don't really see it a ton on the corporate side when it comes in, but you see it in the national labs where there's incentives to have a certain number of suppliers from within the area. I think Los Alamos has like a 7-county region or something like that, where there's an incentive if to be a supplier from that region. I would like to see that so that we can boost, as we're bringing in these big companies, we're boosting our smaller ones and growing them at the same point in time, and making sure that they're available for that. I think that when we look at how we compare to other states with different manufacturing incentives, there's a manufacturing incentive on the books that says that it's like a 5.165% incentive for investing in new capital equipment within a manufacturer. And really that's just alleviating the GRT, and other states don't charge sales tax on manufacturing equipment like that, and they also have an incentive of 5 to 10%. So and that would really help with intelligent manufacturing, and to have it apply to all sizes of businesses, I think would be important as well. Again, making sure that we don't leave our homegrown guys behind when we're investing in the larger companies at the same point in time.
Okay, that's very helpful. We are over time at this point, and I did have one final question, and that is, there are significant opportunities at the federal level for federal dollars through the IRA and infrastructure bills. Are there barriers for either of you that, especially you, Jennifer, given that you provide technical supports to companies, are there barriers, and do you have recommendations on how to better inform entrepreneurs and others to take advantage of the many different programs that are offering federal and state dollars?
Yeah, so I'm sure many of the folks on the call are familiar with the processes, but a lot of times, I would say one of the things that would be really, really helpful, those bills, both infrastructure and the CHIPS Act, both of those are so lengthy that we get calls all the time that say, hey, how do I get involved in this CHIPS Act bill? And what do I do and how do we do it? So having mapped, when you truly try to comb through it and map out what is available to private industry, to small private industry, to non-semiconductor manufacturers, to those folks, it whittles away pretty quickly down to the smaller end. Infrastructure is not quite as bad, but understanding what those channels are and mapping those that we're in an easy to understand format for our business community, I think could be really helpful, and how they align with kind of where the state's strategic plan is going, just because they are so massive. And I know we get a lot of questions asked around that. The other thing is that companies will tell you looks are deceiving a little bit on that. As an entity that applies for and participates in partnership with other entities going after these different grants, they are an enormous amount of time, and they are very, very competitive. And so, we just kind of wrapped up one that was about an 18-month endeavor. Probably all in all, you're from all the different partners and all the different organizations that were involved in it, you're probably looking at a $2 million plus investment just to apply for the grant. And we were very successful in making it to a finalist position, but we didn't get awarded the grant. So when you start talking about those types of numbers being put onto private industry, it gets really, really difficult. They're busy trying to make payroll, right? And so that gets hard too. So I think some higher level cumulative efforts around that, pulling that together, and maybe even if there was any way to have state or municipality support in putting some of those things together from a statewide perspective, and making sure that we're not competing against ourselves. We're too small of a state to be competing against ourselves. So when we have 13 applications go in from the state of New Mexico for an award where only one entity in the state's going to win, we should have put it maybe all together. So having some combined efforts around some of those things, I think would really make things easier in this state. And I know like the state of Utah has done that really successfully in banding together and only really having one or two very distinct proposals go in for some of these larger Build Back Better, CHIPS, infrastructure kind of grants and proposals as well. Does that answer?
Yes, that's actually really helpful information and suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm available now if anybody wanted to stay on, but I'm also available at any time to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Kayla, I think that in the interest of time, we won't be able to get to the rest of what was on the agenda, but very much appreciate Jennifer and Celeste, you presenting to us today. We have this recorded and it will go on the Economic Development Department's website under our task force and council work. And I think it was just so helpful to have the presentations as we continue to work on updating the state's strategic plan, and as the council begins to formulate our recommendations to the task force, and especially in preparation for upcoming things like the state legislature 60-day session this coming year. Kayla, did you have anything you wanted to add or flag?
No, I think we'll wrap up in the interest of time, but we really appreciate this, and it will be available to the remainder of our council members who were unable to make this meeting. So we appreciate your time and expertise and the excellent presentations.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and we'll go ahead and close.
Bye, everyone.